what are you seeing for the companies? What are they doing to truly be inclusive? We talked about some incidents that, well, many incidents have happened, but in the last year, there's been some really terrible things, and now a whole year has gone by. I think all of us are on the people side of the business. You know, even with me, with commercial real estate, I'm helping the tenants, I'm helping the business owners, I'm helping the business owners and the leaders get their staff and their teams back to the workplace and still have everyone, still be able to have everyone get a voice, get a vote, and be able to have the office look how they want it to look and how they want it to feel and how they can be productive. So what are companies doing? What are you seeing?
Before we get to what they're currently doing, I will say there was this window of maybe over focusing on bias, anti-bias training. And it's great to understand what bias is and how it impacts us and how we make choices and all of that. But I think there was a little bit of a check the box of, did that training, now let's get back to the real work. And I think, and I'll let Heather and Joe add to this, that there's been a shift to understand them and now what? And Heather was, referencing those levels of allyship and what's it mean and what can I do as an individual contributor? What can I do as a manager? What can I do as a leader? Now that I understand what biases are, now what do I do?
It's, I think the companies that are really digging in deep are looking at, how do we build a level of awareness through training, through dialogue, not just we gave you some tidbits and whatever, but it's really those dialogues. And how do we set ourselves up so that 2 years from now we're not dealing with the same thing? And some of that is, one, driving it. So right now it's probably leader awareness that they're working on. How do they evolve to a place where it's leader ownership, that it stops being an HR topic, that this is something that leaders are driving and are savvy enough to know how to build, that they're moving from, we're going to talk about diversity numbers or representation. And as I know Amazon had this kind of blowback on them where they're like, we've got a lot of diverse numbers. They all happen to be delivering packages. They're not sitting in our senior executive suite. So how do we make sure that we're setting up an environment that retains the people that we're hiring that have diverse backgrounds, but also developing them into the talent pipeline and succession planning?
Yeah, it's getting people into those positions of decision-making and power. It's making sure that you've got representation and diversity at those levels as well. I think about the NFL, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, there's a rule in the NFL that was instituted a few years ago called the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule, named after Art Rooney, the Pittsburgh Steelers, is that if you are going
whose daughter is an actress. Sorry, I just had to throw it in there.
Oh, really? I did not know that. I will give you the sports perspective. Jerry will give you the entertainment perspective. You have to interview a range of backgrounds or races or ethnicities before you make a head coaching hire or I think it's an assistant coaching hire. Basically, it is mandating that teams, as I like to say, have to cast a wider net, as opposed to just looking at perhaps who might be right in front of them, so to speak. Now, granted, but it's those types of institutional, I think, systems that will start to create a little bit more of a broader reach, number one. But then also understanding it is a work in progress to a certain degree, and constantly refining and revisiting that. For example, unfortunately, as of late, the Rooney Rule kind of got put in the news. Not sure if you heard, there was an individual, happened to be Asian descent, was interviewed for a coaching role, and the response that was given to him, "I'm sorry, you're not the right minority." Whoa. Which, unfortunately, it was. I think the comment was said under the breath. I don't know all. I wasn't there in the room, but this news story has been out, and in a nutshell, that starts to undermine some of those efforts. But by no means should we sit back and regress. Rather, I think, and this is what's being done, is, okay, hold on a second. Let's go back and take a look at why was this rule established? What is it that we can do as organizations in order to be better? Unfortunately, I tend to draw a little bit on sports, and my colleagues, Heather and Jerry, have heard me tell this before. I am a huge, huge Negro Leagues baseball fan. And one of my favorite stories is when Jackie Robinson was brought up, and the Branch Rickey talks about bringing him up. And yes, he was the first Black professional baseball player. And there is some personal connection that Rickey has to that. But he talks about the fact that it was just good business. Number one, Jackie Robinson at the time was by far one of the most talented. Number two, the moment you started to open it up to a diverse population, the fans came from a diverse population. The gate all of a sudden increased. The support came. So it's the more that businesses, as Heather had said, it's less about, okay, we've checked the box. It's an HR thing. It goes over there in that department, but rather we just think about this as smart business overall. I think the more you'll start to see this integrated.
And to add to that is just think of what did it take for Jackie Robinson to get as good as he was at baseball, and what would happen if, and now we've seen that sports organizations as well as companies realize that if we're going to say, oh, well, we would have hired somebody diverse or not somebody from a diverse background, but there just wasn't anybody available, that we don't just go, well, then that's not our job. Then we're going to just hire whoever's there. That there is a level of community outreach that companies and organizations have to do to help build that talent. And I even want to go back to what I just said, hire somebody diverse. Nobody's diverse. Like, their background is diverse, but they're not a diverse hire. But how do we create that community? What happens now if all these baseball organizations and football organizations and companies are going out and finding kids when they're young and investing in educational programs and their college opportunities, and not just leave it to, do you have family wealth? Which, by the way, a lot of people depending on their backgrounds, aren't going to have even a chance at the level of legacy wealth that certain races or certain genders might.
Right.